Hello and welcome to Facebook Live. My name's Dave Rowley and I'm the Training Technical Manager for BAL. And this is obviously BAL Tanning and also CTD. So this is actually a live event on behalf of CTD and BAL. We're actually going to be covering today the external range. Both actually bedding mortars and using 20mm porcelain, but also the conventional way of fixing tiles onto a concrete base. So let's kick things off. Okay. External tiling is not something new to many of you. We've been tiling external for many years. But what is actually different is that traditionally tiling outside had to be on a concrete base, and we've got some new systems to actually showcase this evening as well. But more importantly, this is about opening up other avenues, other skills sectors that you can tap into, whereby they will put down a traditional MOT, which is military of transport, which is aggregate, limestone, crushed limestone, that you put down on the floor at 100mm minimum, and you actually can pat that down well with a whacker plate. Once you've actually done that, what you then do is we've actually got a system that can go straight on top of it. Within the system itself, we have the following. We have a primary slurry bond, which is actually highly polymer modified, mixed with 6.4 litres of water, and you actually physically paint that onto the actual MOT, or brush it on, should I say. You don't have to go on your hands and knees, you can literally brush it over the MOT. While it is still wet, we actually have then a bedding mortar that is pre-blended. All you do is add water, and just 2 litres of water is required per bag. That, when you mix with 2 litres of water, you can actually provide a semi-dry mix, and that then is actually suitable to go directly onto the slurry bond, and then literally you compact it down, rule it all off, and then you apply the same product beneath, which is the primary slurry bond, on top of the bedding mortar while it's still wet again, so it's wet on wet on wet. And then you also apply a thin layer of the slurry bond on the back of the porcelain. This system is actually primarily designed for self-supporting tiles, i.e. 20mm porcelain. This system cannot be used with normal traditional tiling. So it is actually designed for pavers, not tiles. Okay, but the best thing to do is actually see the product itself, and obviously any questions coming through, I'll endeavour to actually answer them as we go along. If there's actually too many, we'll obviously answer them after the live event. Okay, so what I've actually got here, I've actually got a frame put down which will put the bedding mortar on. So first of all, before you do anything, what you first of all do is actually put the prime slurry bond, which I've pre-mixed. So this actually is a very fluid material. You only need particularly between 1-2 sort of thickness, but obviously if it's slightly thicker, depending on the MOT, but you literally just want to apply a thin layer onto the actual MOT. Now this, I'm using a trowel in this particular case, but as I said earlier, this can be brushed, and all you do is providing a wet system for the bedding mortar to anchor, to bond, to adhere to the surface. Once you've actually applied that there, now the thing is, you wouldn't just do a very small area. Obviously this is just purely for training purposes. You would do a large area, because this has actually got a open time of 30 minutes. So as you can imagine, you could do quite a fair size area. The working time of the product is 60 minutes. So you brush this out over a large area, pre-do your rails. So I'm using timber, but you may use screeding bars, or you can use the bedding mortar itself, or timber, however you want to work yourself. What you then do is the actual bedding mortar is pre-blended. This only requires 2 litres of water. That mixture then provides a semi-dry mix, which I've actually done already. And literally, when you squeeze the mortar together to ensure that you're getting the right amount of water itself, you can create a ball with it. If that is too dry, it will fall apart. If it's too wet, the material starts to run through your fingers. So you want it just enough, but that's where the benefits of this is you now have consistency. The right grade of aggregate, the right amount of cement, but also polymers are actually in this as well to actually help, which is why it's recommended and suitable for external applications. But that itself, you put the actual bedding mortar straight onto the actual slurry bond. Now, I'll go through the actual mixing process in a moment. You can actually just feed it over the area itself. This is why you can actually do quite a large area, because you can literally just lay the bedding mortar just to cover over the slurry itself, so the fact that then you don't walk on it. You can walk over the top. That obviously also will help to compact it down. And then what you do is literally compress that into the actual area. Now, one of the beauties about this is you only need a minimum of 25 mil. That is actually a lot less than using traditional bedding mortars and sand cement. And because it's only 25 mil required, minimum, onto MOT, it actually now also makes it more cost effective, also ensuring you get compactability.
Dave, I've got a question for you to come in.
Yep.
From Duncan, who says, will this work over the top of concrete steps and slabs?
If it was already a traditional, if it was already an existing step, then you could use tile adhesives for that section. It's obviously more of a screed material than a render, but obviously your rises you could use an adhesive, but the actual step itself you can use this system. So anything on a base, yes. The only thing is onto a concrete step or concrete base, you can use this system. It does not, it's not designed just for MOT, though that's going to be the biggest benefit, because most gardens, ground terraces are not got bases. But you can put this onto a concrete base at just a minimum of 10 mil. To keep putting that to context, 10 mil thickness of the bedding mortar will cover just over a square metre per area. If on MOT, at 25 mil, you're looking at just over or just about half a metre per bag. So, what you then do, screening bar, compact it, it is important it's actually well compacted itself. And then what you do afterwards is using a wooden float or a honeycomb type of float, rub over the surface. That ties it all in, locks in that little amount of moisture that's actually in the bedding mortar, firms up the top surface, And when you'll know if they've actually put too much water, because you'll bring all the water to the surface.
So another question from Duncan. It says, thanks. So can I remove the slabs and bed in 25 mil of that mortar flush to the concrete steps, then tile over both without worrying about differential movement?
If the concrete, make sure the concrete steps are actually, take any sort of dirt off the surface. You may need to jet wash it first. What you then do on the actual base of the step is use the slurry bond, and you only need a minimum of 10 mil. Mix your porcelain in the same method you see here. On your risers, then I would use a tile adhesive.
Right.
And that's basically all you do. But the material itself is firmed up, so you can't physically put and print in the actual material. What you then do...
Why can't you use a metal float, Dave?
If you use a metal float, it actually brings all the remaining moisture that's in there to the surface, and then that means the bottom of the actual bedding mortar will be bone dry, and therefore what will happen is that could crumble. You need moisture in the bedding mortar, but equally you don't want it too dry or too wet, which is why all you do is you would mix 2 litres of water per bag. The slurry bond itself, as I said, has 60 minutes, 1 hour, and that's 1 hour pot life, but obviously you could do a large area, that stays wet for 30 minutes. What you then do, as you can see, apply it onto the actual bedding mortar. If you've actually compacted it, you will see it's not pulling it off the surface. You don't need to put it too thick. You want about 1 mil to 2. So everything is wet on wet, but also on the porcelain, so the porcelain itself, what you can do also is take some of the porcelain either with a brush or trowel. Now, depending on the indent on the back of the tile, if it's quite a deep profile, then a trowel would be preferred. Apply that over the back. Just 1 mil, that's all you need, because you've got the actual material on the base. So scratch it out until you've actually got the thickness you need. And then that can be adhered straight into the soil. This can also now be moved in. You can use a mallet. To get it into position. And that there now is it. You literally let that dry. This actually takes, this mortar is quite unique. Where traditional sand and cement, the issues you face is, one, you mix a lot more. 2, drying aspect is a big issue. This actually dries and can be grouted and walked on in just 12 hours. So the following day, you can literally start finishing off or continue the work from one day to the next. Now, obviously I'm going to just show you one tile. If you get to the stage where you finish for that day and you've got to come back the following day, all you would do is just make sure that you cut any of the mortar away from the edge of your tile. And then what you do the following day is you then continue with the same process, slurry bond onto the MOT, but then brush just the edge of where the bedding mortar was cut, so that you link in the next bedding mortar to the one you did the day before, so it locks in to it. You don't actually need to put expansion joints at that point, because that's one of the beauties with these systems, you're not following the tile standards. So therefore you haven't got to be restricted to the 3 metre bay areas for external with lighter colour tiles, and darker tiles you need to reduce that to 2 metre areas. This doesn't require the same amount of expansion joints in the floor because it's a different method, with being on an MOT, not on a solid concrete base. But that's there, literally into place. You've got the beauty about this, you can use clip systems because you're on a bedding mortar, but that itself is now will self-support. It's a heavy tile, but the mortar, because you've compacted it, it will literally now support the weight while it's in its wet state. And literally, the following day, you can start grouting it, as I say, minimum 12 hours. The actual bedding mortar itself is actually workable, as I say now, for literally 1 hour. The slurry bond is also 1 hour. You're getting per bag at 25 mil, you're looking at half a metre. The slurry bond, when mixed, which is a 20 kilo bag, that requires 6.4 litres of water, and you've got a coverage around about 7 to 8 square metres at a sort of 2 mil thickness. Okay, but there you go. So you're going to be using large amounts. You're not going to be mixing just half a bag, but the beauty is you can mix 4 bags, get consistency, and the fact that you can literally grout the following day using grouts such as the BAL grout. This was actually formulated. This was actually formulated so that you can fill these 20 mil porcelain, as you probably experience yourselves. Grouting obviously quite thick joints or thick tiles or pavers, you normally sometimes cap over, and over a period of time, not realising yourself that that grout or material just falls to the bottom of the joint. This is super smooth and will fill those 20 mil porcelain with very ease. It's a cementitious grout, comes in 4 colours, and that can go from very wide joint to very narrow. I would typically always recommend a 3 mil joint minimum, which is obviously required for expansion, but you can go anything up to 15 mil joint width with this as well, in the four colours. It's a 24-hour set, but you can actually mix a full bag, and you've got over an hour to actually physically use that in. Washing off purpose with this, as you're probably familiar, you should leave it at least a minimum of 15 minutes, but it could take up to half an hour as well before you start washing off. Make sure the joints are firmed up in the joints before you start putting water over the top. So that's sort of the actual layering system. Everything is wet upon wet upon wet. Just key things about the mixing of the bedding mortar. This, as I say, is a 25 kilo bag. What is actually important with this, if you've mixed up sand and cement in the past, from every single job I've experienced myself, the actual sand that you get on site can change so rapidly. Some it could be quite coarse to unworkable, and it could be too fine in some cases. This is actually a blend, and the blend in this, because we have all the raw materials sent here and everything's quality checked, every bag of the bedding mortar will be the same no matter where you are in the country. Okay, and every product itself has got a 12-month shelf life. As far as mixing, I've just purely for this demonstration, I've just used a normal paddle mixer. Okay, so what you would normally use when you're mixing up adhesives, leveling compounds, you name it. If you're going to be mixing up larger quantities, which in fairness, a bag itself, you're going to be using 3 or 4 bags quite easily in a very short space of time. It's always maybe advisable to actually use a mixer to mix the actual screen material, the bedding mortar in this case. Because it's semi-dry, it's actually important on the type of mixer, the mixing equipment you're going to use. So what you should always use is a force action mixer. For those who aren't aware, a force action mixer is actually a barrel mixer example, whereby you literally pour the material and it actually spirals, turns around in this direction, and literally blends the material as it would do if you're using a normal paddle mixer. If you're going to use the other sort of common mixes, which is well, a normal cement mix, which obviously rotates in that direction. Those mixes are normally used for renders and mortars for bricks, so that it's a wetter material. You should not use that type of mixer for these type of materials because you're mixing semi-dry. And if you can appreciate and just visualize for a moment, because it obviously balls up to actually form the compaction, if it rotates around in this direction, what happens? The material runs around, drops to the bottom of the mixer, and will create small little lumps, which then won't be blended and mixed properly, and you can have an issue with regards to adhesion and obviously compactability when you come to compact material down. But there you have it. That literally is also the beauty with the slurry bond. You can adjust it and move it for 20, 30 minutes after you've laid it. So you can get your joint levels, you're not restricted off. With a lot of slurry bonds, you put it down, it goes off very quickly. And the problem is it doesn't give you time to adjust and move. Important with regards to temperature applies with these systems as it does with any building material. You should always make sure that you plan in advance, check the weather, you make sure that the temperature is at least 5 degrees, but also rising. And also make sure if you've got any rain coming in, if it's obviously very little showers, it won't be too much of a harm, but it's important if it's going to pour down very hard and heavy, then it's good to actually put some covering over either while you're working or while you wait for that rain to just stop. Any questions on the bedding mortar before we move on?
No.
Good. Okay then. So that's the system. As I said before, it's important here. The MOT that you put down first needs to be minimum 100 mil. The beauty about this is you only need a minimum 25. As Duncan obviously asked earlier, you can use this onto concrete as well, and obviously steps on the base of the steps itself. But you need to make sure you put at least a minimum of 10. What I didn't tell you is the bedding mortar can be increased up to 100 mil thickness. Yes, it will work, but obviously it's a better, where possible, if you've got some height that you need to build up, try and do that and calculate that with the MOT first, so you bring the bedding mortar down to a minimum requirement, being 10 for concrete, or in this case 25 for MOT. So if there's no further questions, what I'd like to do now is...
Sorry, just to clarify, Duncan's just asked about the minimum and maximum depth, but I think you just said it.
Yeah, minimum is 25 on MOT and maximum is 100. But I would encourage any thickness, try where possible to build up with the MOT itself. But at least you've got the flexibility. If you do need to build up with this, you can do it. Good. Right. So what I'd like to do now is actually go through the sort of traditional type of method. So this is actually not something new, but we've had levelling compounds within the BAL range for many years. We actually launched, when we launched the external system, an external level. This is actually very unique in the sense that Level Out, BAL Level Out is actually a self-smoothing compound that can go from 2 mil up to 20 mil in one application. With this system itself, it's single part, so you haven't got to add a bottle to it, you literally add just over 5 litres of water, 5.25 litres of water, and that provides the actual consistency to apply from depths of 2 to 20. And that will dry in just 3 hours. You can actually walk over it as soon as that, as I can vouch with CTD actually standing here because they've been using the products today. The compound does dry quite quickly, but you must wait for the 3 hours before you start tiling on top of it. Also, I want to make it clear with regards to the Level Out compound, if anyone thinks, can I use this onto MOT? The answer is no. This is actually only suitable for solid bases such as concrete that you need prepared flat, ready for receiving ceramic tiles or pavers using traditional fixing of tile adhesive such as BAL Pourable 1. The material itself, literally as I said, coverage wise with the BAL Level Out is to 3 mil bed thickness. You are looking at getting 5 square metres. And all you need to do as far as preparation, clean down the concrete base first, jet wash it, remove any contamination. Once you've actually done that, if the concrete itself is actually dry and it's quite porous, you can actually dampen down the actual concrete first with some water. Just takes a lot of suction out so that the actual self-leveling compound can go over without releasing the water into the concrete base too quickly. But more importantly, if you do dampen down, make sure that you don't put too much water and you've got a pooling of water there. If and when the preparation has been done, all you do is, let's say, add clean cold water. And in this case, I've already pre-measured the actual water in the BAL mixing bucket. And then all you do is add the leveling compound, the BAL Level Out, to the water in approximately 2 stages. You add about 1/2 to 3/4 of the compound first. You should always mix this with some form of paddle mixer. Drill on with a paddle on the end, as long as it's powerful enough. Don't mix this by hand or with a wooden stick. So I'm going to add about 2/3 of the actual compound first. Once the powder has been dispersed in the water, add the remaining powder. And this is what it is with all the BAL external systems, is you put the right amount of water in, you've got consistency every single time. Now, if you're going to be doing lots of these, I'll give you just wait till it's mixed up, which will take a second. So I've added all the powder now to the actual water. What it's always a good idea, everyone, is when you're mixing any products, especially adhesives, compounds, and so on alike, is you leave it now for just a minute or so, and that just helps to just firm up and actually introduce itself to all the different additives, polymers, retarding agents, and all types of things that are actually in the different type of products. That actually helps because if you've actually experienced when you've mixed products in the past, and especially this, I've seen this with towel adhesives anyway, is you mix the products up, you leave it, you actually start using the products, and then afterwards, you find when you come back to the adhesive, it feels as if it's starting to firm up. And that's because it's actually structured up. That's what it happens with this. By leaving just a minute so, it actually structures up. It actually physically interacts the different forward additives that are in there. By then, leave it after a minute or so, remix just for 30 seconds, and that consistency then will be the same throughout its pot life. With BAL Level Out, the pot life of this is actually, you've got 30 minutes to use it. You have a wet edge of between 15 and 20 minutes. So you can actually do a number of different pours, so it's ideal for large areas. Other good thing about it with this, if you're doing multiple mixes, it's always a good idea, and something I've done in the past. If you drill a hole through your mixing bucket at 5.25 litres of water, an example for this product, then wherefore you can actually put it under a tap, top it up with water, and the water won't ever go past that point. Therefore, from one mix to the next, you've got constant consistency, and all you do is that water gets tipped into another mixing bucket, gorilla tub, whatever, and you mix your compounds. You get consistency every single time. Just give this a quick blast down. And material now, all you do is literally pour it onto the floor. Obviously, as I said before, you can dampen this down first if it's actually very porous. Taking your trowel and literally float it into the area. Keep the material itself is very fluid, so it actually provides a nice, smooth, flat surface ready for putting your tile adhesives over the top. There you go. So you literally smooth it out, and that, even though it's quite wet, you can literally feel it starting to harden on the surface. And literally, you can walk on it in 2 hours, which means then it gives you the ability to be able to now start preparing it, setting it out, ready for your porcelain tiles, both tiles, but also you can actually use the pavers as well, and just fix in the traditional manner with a tile adhesive. So just remind you, this system here is actually on a concrete base only, but at least you've got the ability, if you've got customers who've got tiles indoors, but they also want to use them outdoors, as long as it's a concrete base, you can actually put those, and the tiles are suitable for external as well, which obviously is important to check. Those tiles can then be used for indoors and outdoors, fixed in the traditional manner. Follow the standards of the tiling standards, which is BS 535, when it comes to expansion joints and so on. But there you have now is your traditional leveling out product. One point that hasn't probably been mentioned, and maybe something you thought about, every base itself, or any method you're doing outside, you should always work to a form of a gradient of 135 to 180. If the concrete base has got a slight fall to it, which hopefully it should have, then be mindful with this being a self-smoothing material. If there's quite a gradient on there, 180 or more, what we can do with this, and this is the beauty about the product, you have the flexible approach that if you've got a slight fall, you can actually use this and just mix with water, with slightly less water. So instead of being 5.25, if you put 5 litres of water in, only a little bit less, that actually makes a big difference, where it will still provide you a nice, smooth, flat surface, no trowel marks in there, but at least then all the material's not running to obviously to the fall of the base itself. Well, there you have it. There you have, as far as now, the traditional route, nice flat surface, and then what we would recommend is you go on top of that with a BAL adhesive such as BAL Porcelain Wad, which is focused and designed for bigger format tiles, but also you can use this with your 20mm porcelain or pavers. Installed, 3 hours later, you can literally actually grout up. The BAL Porcelain one is also, can be used for obviously rises on steps. It's not designed for wall application primarily, but for steps on the rises it can actually be used. And literally it can be built out as well. It's got the capability of going to 25 mil in one application, in isolated areas, so half-metre sections, but that's the beauty about it, is if there's actually a need to build up, then you have got the ability of doing that with that particular product. And it will dry at 3 hours regardless of the thickness as well. Okay, one colour, so it's suitable for all types of materials, including stone as well as porcelain pavers and ceramic tiles. Okay, and then finish that off with the terrace grouts in the same way. This is again can be used in the traditional manner externally, as well as obviously with the bedding mortar slurry bond coat when going on to MOT and such like. Any questions at all on any of the two systems that you'd like to ask?
I've got a question.
Yep.
Can you spike roll that?
This itself, as you've seen here, I haven't actually used a spike roller, and in fairness, with most of our traditional levelling compounds that we use internally, we don't recommend spike rolls such as Level Max and Level Fast. But with the Level Out external compound, you can actually spike roll this if you need to, if you want to agitate it to allow the air out, or to provide a more flat surface if you need that if you're not getting the levels in just troweling itself. Good. So I hope today has actually been useful, this Facebook Live has been useful. Obviously, please continue to ask. Please continue to ask if you need, if you have any sort of guidance or questions going forward, because these are some unique, different ways of fixing. Obviously, we're always on hand there to support the field. Also, CDD are obviously there to help and support you as well. But if it's better now to have you consider external tiling is becoming more and more popular. This gives you the opportunity to now physically enter a new area of the market where you can literally install porcelain pavers in a situation where you've got no concrete bases onto type 1 MOT, minimum 100 mil, and literally put a very thin bedding mortar with a slurry slurry primer both beneath the MOT and literally laying the porcelain wet on wet. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Thank you.